The G9X is Umidigi's latest entry-level smartphone. For just $79, you get 4GB of RAM, 128GB of storage, a Full HD screen, and a 5000 mAh battery. On paper, that's a great deal, but I'm here to tell you that specs don't make it smartphones. In this review, we'll see if those great numbers translate into a worthy budget Android phone that's worth your money. Umidigi ships the G9X with a plastic pouch, a screen guard that's already applied to the screen, so you got to be careful because the screen guard is very thin and bonded to the protective film that comes with the phone out of the box. I'm saying this because in my case, while I was removing the film, I unintentionally took off the screen guard. There's a charger in the box as well, a USB-C cable, the phone manual, and a SIM ejector tool. Like most Umidigi smartphones and most Android phones at this price point, the Umidigi G9X comes with a plastic build. It's a good looking smartphone, all things considered. I just wish they do away with the chain, which is pretty much standard on all Umidigi smartphones. The design is simple, so none of that Fox textured back stuff you see on the Note 100. There's a camera cutout on the back for what looks like 3 cameras, but in reality it's 2 cameras and a fake bump housing the flash. The bezels are still fairly thick, again customary for Umidigi. And on a G9X you get a teardrop notch, which in my opinion makes for a cleaner look. At 191 grams, it's also one of the lighter Umidigi smartphones. It feels nice in hand, and even though this is a relatively tall phone, both the power and the volume buttons are well placed, easy to reach and responsive when clicked. You're getting a HD screen, which is pretty much standard for phones at this price point, and I'll say it looks fairly good enough on the G9X, even better than the HD screen on the Note 100 with similar specifications. Colors popped enough, there was none of the grayish white I'd experienced with the Note 100, and even though you don't get 120Hz screen refresh rate, which is what is on the Note 100, I reckon you wouldn't miss it on this phone. Images were sharp. If you squint hard or take the phone close enough to your eyes, you will see individual pixels, no doubt, but for a phone at this price point, the G9X gets a pass in the screen department. I'll start by saying this runs Android 14 Go out of the box, which is basically a toned down version of Android for phones with less than capable processing power. Naturally, that meant only one thing. I was going to load this up with the most performance intensive and demanding games I could download and see if I'd end up frying the CPU. I started with Call of Duty, and first thing you notice is the app automatically sets the graphics quality to low, but it was working. In fact, I was starting to enjoy myself, and even though my palms could literally feel the heat from the overworked chipset, I was gaming and it was handling Call of Duty to a manageable standard. So I needed to bring out the big guns. Now you could see the G9X suffer. Phone ran hot, took almost 2 hours to complete the initial load up, basically skipped at every frame, and you could almost feel the processor begging for its life. But you know what, it didn't light up in flames. Turns out that chipset powering the G9X was not going out without a fight. Paired to 4GB of RAM and 128GB of internal storage, this chipset and its Android Go operating system survived my onslaught. It's certainly not the phone you want to get for any serious bits of gaming or performance intensive stuff, and I did experience some stutter and freezes as time went on, but for what it's worth, it held on to its own quite well. I went on to daily the phone for a few more days. Using its browser was smooth, social media apps worked fine, and I managed to handle multitasking well enough. Honestly, did not think the G9X would hold up well when it comes to performance, given that it runs on Android Go, but overall, I was pleasantly surprised. The camera on the G9X was as run-of-the-mill as can get for a budget Android phone. In low light conditions, images were very blurry and quite frankly not good enough. When there was enough light, it was barely good. In very well lit conditions, picture quality improved significantly to good enough. The actual camera setup is a 13 megapixel wide camera paired to another 0.3 megapixel camera, but I'm not quite sure what that does exactly. As I mentioned earlier, the third camera bump is actually for the flash. The selfie cam is a 5 megapixel setup, and pretty much all I've said for the main camera holds true for it. Good in bright light, bordering on useless in low light. There are 5 shooting modes: portrait, panoramic, night, and pro. Portrait mode basically adds a skin smoothing filter, so not very useful. Same case with night mode, it didn't really make a difference in low light condition. Panoramic mode on the other hand works well enough, but I didn't even bother to try out the pro mode. Video quality, like photo quality, was okay-ish in bright scenes, but I did notice a lot of shaking in the footage. Not that I expect this to come with any sophisticated image stabilization, but it was so bad that some clips were practically unusable. Despite having the stated 5000 mAh battery pack, I found the G9X lacking when it came to battery life. On a full charge and with consistent routine use, this only went about 12 hours in my experience. If you use it intensively, battery life drops dramatically to a few hours. Matter of fact, at the point I saw battery life fall about 10% in the space of 15 minutes while I was downloading an app over Wi-Fi, which is super weird for a phone with 5000 mAh battery. The phone ships with a 10 watts charger that does 0 to 100% in about 1 hour 20 minutes. The G9X doesn't officially support any fast charging technology. One nice bit with Umidigi is they've retained the headphone jack, so if you're a grandma or a granddad, that's something to tickle your fancy. You also get a power button mounted fingerprint sensor as well as facial recognition. The fingerprint sensor works say 6 out of 10 times, so not very sensitive but manageable. But same cannot be said for the facial recognition and facial unlock system. It's pretty much hit and miss and unreliable overall. Should you buy this phone? If you need a basic Android phone for calls, social media, and other routine stuff, then the G9X is worth your consideration. It doesn't particularly stand out anywhere, true, but when you factor in the price, it all makes sense. At $74, this is one of the cheapest smartphones you can buy new right now. And that $74 gets you a smartphone with an okay screen, an old but capable processor, fairly good build quality, and a decent camera. Sure, the battery life is a little bit suspicious, especially given that this is marketed as a 5000 mAh phone, but you'll be hard pressed to find better in that department at this price point. If you're in the market for anything other than a serious Android phone, maybe something to use as your second phone, then I'd recommend it.